soldiers fled and spread the report that an angel had driven them away. When the Asir youth had set himself down upon the stone, there came a new earth shock, and a draught of air passing down through the grotto blew out the lamp and gave place for the morning light. 30 hours had now passed since the assumed death of Jesus, and when the brother, having heard a slight noise within the grotto, went in to observe what had happened, he smelled a strange odour in the air, such as often occurs when the earth is about to vomit forth fire. And the youth observed with inexpressible joy that the lips of the body moved, and that it breathed. He at once hastened to assist Jesus, and heard slight sounds rising from the breast. The face assumed a living appearance, and the eyes opened, and in astonishment gazed at the novice of our order. This occurred just as I was leaving with our brethren of the first degree from the council with Joseph, who had come to consult how to bring help. Nicodemus, who was an inexperienced physician, said on the way that the peculiar condition of the atmosphere caused by the revolution of the elements was beneficial to Jesus, and that he had never believed that Jesus was really dead. And he further said that the blood and water which flowed from the wound was a sure sign that life was not extinct. Conversing thus, we arrived at the grotto, Joseph and Nicodemus going before. We were in all 24 brethren of the first degree. Entering, we perceived the white-robed novice kneeling upon the moss-strewn floor of the grotto, supporting the head of the revived Jesus on his breast. And as Jesus recognized his friends, his eyes sparkled with joy, his cheeks were tainted with a faint red, and he sat up asking, "Where am I?" Then Joseph embraced him, folded him in his arms, and told him how it had all come to pass, and how he was saved from actual death by a profound fainting fit, which the soldiers on Calvary had thought was death. And Jesus wondered and felt on himself, and praising God, he wept on the breast of Joseph. Then Nicodemus urged his friends to take some refreshments, and he ate some dates and some bread dipped in honey, and Nicodemus gave wine to drink, after which Jesus was greatly refreshed, so that he raised himself up. Then it was that he became conscious of the wounds in his hands and in his side, but the balsam with which Nicodemus had spread upon them had a soothing effect, and they had already commenced to heal. The account, however, does not stop there. The letter goes on to describe how Jesus moved about in the land secretly thereafter. It describes how Jesus went to Galilee and then to Bethania. It describes how his disciples, upon seeing him, believed that he would now liberate them from the yoke of the Romans. And how much this grieved Jesus, for he had told them many times that the kingdom of God was a spiritual kingdom, not a physical one. The account goes on to say of how Jesus resolved to leave the land of his crucifixion and to migrate in the eastern direction. Jesus' last meeting with his disciples and his subsequent migration east is related by the eyewitness as follows. Thereupon he gathered together... This won't be that long, I promise. Thereupon he gathered together his disciples and went through the city and out of the gate that leads to the valley of Josaphat. And his soul was greatly moved, and his heart was filled with sadness, for he knew that this would be his last walk. Arriving at Gedron, he tarried for a little while and wept over Jerusalem. Thence he went forward in silence, and his disciples followed him. And Jesus led them to the place most dear to him, near the summit of Mount Olivet, where can be seen almost the whole of the land of Palestine. For Jesus longed once more to look upon the country where he had lived and worked. To the east was seen Jordan, the Dead Sea, and the Arabian mountains, and to the west shone the fires of the Temple Rock, but on the other side of the mountain was Bethania. And the chosen disciples believed that Jesus would lead them to Bethania. The elders of the brotherhood had silently come together on the other side of the mountain, ready to travel, waiting with Jesus as had been agreed upon. And as he exhorted his disciples to be of good cheer and firm of faith, as he spoke, his voice grew more and more melancholy, and his mind was absorbed in solemn transport. He prayed for the friends that he was about to leave, and lifting his arms, he blessed them. And the morning mist rose about the mountain, tinted by the descending sun. He prayed for the friends he was about to... Then the elders of the Asir brotherhood sent word to Jesus that they were waiting, and that it was already late. As the disciples knelt down, their faces bent towards the ground, Jesus rose and hastily went away through the gathering mist. When the disciples rose, There stood before them 2 of our brethren in the white garb of our brotherhood, and they instructed them not to wait for Jesus as he was gone, whereupon they hastened away down the mountain. But the disappearance of Jesus filled his disciples with new hope and confidence, for now they knew that they themselves were to proclaim the word of Jesus, as he, their beloved, would return no more. Therefore faithfully they kept together, and daily went to the temple and to the places where he had taught them, and the enemies dared not molest them. But in the city there arose a rumor that Jesus was taken up in a cloud and had gone to heaven. This was invented by the people who had not been present when Jesus departed. The disciples did not contradict this rumor, inasmuch as it served to strengthen their doctrine and influence the people who wanted a miracle in order to believe in him. John, who was present, knew of all these things, but he had not spoken nor written about it. Likewise Matthew. There are others who have gathered the rumors thereof into an illustration, which they believed themselves as they were moved by the Spirit to glorify Jesus. Thus one of them, named Marcus, wrote to a congregation in Rome and gave an account of this event, but inasmuch as he had not been present, his source of information was the rumors among the people. Even thus is it with Lucas, who tried to do the same. The author goes on to write of how he was told by other members of the Essene movement that Jesus had died and was buried near the Dead Sea. Let me repeat that. The author goes on to write of how he was told by the other members of the Essene movement that Jesus had died and was buried near the Dead Sea, soon after leaving Judea. But, however, unlike the crucifixion scene, this was not witnessed by the author of the letter. He states Jesus' death near the Dead Sea on the basis of hearsay. The author's words that you have just heard, in which he says that the Gospels of Mark and Luke contained many errors on account of the fact that they were not eyewitnesses to the events of the crucifixion, can also be applied equally to a statement that Jesus died somewhere near the Dead Sea, which he also did not witness. It does not make sense that having suffered on the cross and having been in a critical condition in the sepulchre, he should have survived to such a degree whereby he was eventually able to travel a distance of about 100 miles on foot from Judea to Galilee, yet that after all that, once he was out of sight and out of danger, he should have ominously died near the Dead Sea. Evidently, as Jesus moved eastward, the elders of the Essene community had one of 2 options. They could proclaim that he was moving east, but if they did that, people would no doubt follow him. The other option was to say that Jesus died while travelling. They evidently adopted the latter as a cover-up so that people would not follow him. Indeed, if Jesus did die near the Dead Sea, then why was the Essene community never told of the location of the grave or what he died of? Moreover, no mention is made of what happened to Mary, the mother of Jesus, who also disappeared at the same time that Jesus disappeared. To this we shall return later. There is, however, another very important reason that Jesus could not have died at the Dead Sea. It relates to his own prophecy that he would gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also must I bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. John chapter 10, verse 16. The words, they shall hear my voice, clearly point to the fact that Jesus believed that he himself was to visit the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It is a historical fact that the Jews of Palestine to whom he had preached until his crucifixion did not represent more than 1 or 2 tribes of Israel. Of the 12 tribes of Israel, the other 10 tribes had settled in around Tibet, Kashmir, and Afghanistan 721 years before Jesus due to Babylonian excesses. Therefore, the mission of Jesus, according to his own prophecy, would have remained incomplete if he had not presented himself to the lost sheep of the house of Israel in those eastern lands. Without presenting himself to them, he would have only accomplished 1/6 of his mission, for he had, by the time of his crucifixion, only preached to 1/6 of the tribes of Israel. The people of Kashmir, stretching into Afghanistan, have always claimed to be the lost sheep of the house of Israel, ever since time immemorial. Indeed, the claim is as old as the people themselves. A writer named John Knoll wrote in quite an old article of 1930, it was the only one I could find, in his magazine called Asia, that immensely strong are the picturesque, broad-shouldered Kashmiri peasants
and yet docile and meek.